Hey, you guys, week 6 review Anthrosphere. This was the last week, this was last Tuesday. And essentially, for this class, we talked about human beings and how our sphere really works. And we talked about where humans came from, so the out of Africa theory, and how we dispersed from Africa into the cradle lands, which was up the Indus River in Babylon, so ancient Iraq, and in some ways it's one of the most shameful bits of the war in Iraq is that these areas were the heart of civilization. It's where human beings first domesticated animals, domesticated plants, and were able to spread on from there. And it's really been decimated in the last little bit, along with some of that knowledge and some of the plant species and those types of things. From there, when we moved into other places and were able to settle there, we started getting into the idea of population and population growth. Now that people weren't nomadic, they were able to raise family to help with the labor, and the idea of population growth and how that really works in demography. And two I guess, social scientists from the 1800s. One was Malthus and the other was a French man named Condorcet. Both had their own theories on what the limit to population growth could be. So, and on Malthus's side, he said that population will only grow until the food supply runs out, and then it'll stable off with that limit in place. On the other hand, Condorcet, the French guy who's around the same time, cleaning up my apartment now, was interested in the idea that technological advances would be able to increase the food supply, and we'd be able to keep growing, not with the food limit in hand, but with the technological limits of how we can produce food, which is an interesting concept considering in the movie Food Inc., we've really seen how technology can enhance the food supply with certainly some disadvantages to it. The next one we talked about was density, and there was, I think, 8 definitions of density, each with their own meaning or comparison factors, and we went from just your traditional arithmetic density right down to an ecological density or carrying capacity of the earth. The demographic transition model was the next big idea in that lecture, and that one showed from right at the beginning of an industrialized country right through to a stage 4 country or a modern developed country, and how the population death rates and birth rates are affected by certain factors and features that come along with each of those stages in development. Next, we talked about migration. Migration is one of the big ones that we face, especially now that we have such a growing population, maybe out of control in some people's minds. And we talked about forced migration, where people don't have a choice, war, hunger, and some other ways that migration is forced upon people, and voluntary. And one of the biggest voluntary ones is people looking for work or people looking for education, and so that's a voluntary choice type one. The other migration features were intermigration and which is it within the country, and immigration without, so moving across national boundaries, and that's been a bit of a theme that's come up in so far, where people are crossing migration into other countries and has affected both our labor markets and our product and supply markets as well. Dealing with migration, especially international, or not international, but intranational, so within the same country, we talked about the movement towards urbanization. We talked about the movement, once urbanization happens, to suburbanization, a counter-urbanization, and how we're dealing with people, especially around the ideas of smart growth and really effective and efficient city planning to be able to make sure that everybody can live. And lastly, just the idea, the concept of globalization. There is a definition as well as an anti-globalization message as well, and both of them have their place. Not everybody's in favor of a global world, and it's important to understand that there are some detractions from the idea of globalization. So that's week 6. I think week 3 is next, so I'm going to try and give that a go as best I can. It's going to be hard to replicate a lecture, but I'll do my best. And there's very few exam questions from lecture 3 that you'd be able to get anyways. So, all right.